Greetings all and welcome to Lecture 8 on Free Methodist History and Polity. In this lecture I want to talk about Free Methodist Church USA leadership as well as structure. It's just helpful for you to know and to be able to see the breakdown of our conferences across the United States. So in the Free Methodist Church USA, we are led by bishops, superintendents, pastors, lay leaders, but our bishops give oversight to the total work in the United States. We currently have 3 bishops. Sometimes that changes based upon what the General Conference has decided. Right now we have 3, Bishop Keith Cowart, Bishop Kay Coldy, and Bishop Kenny Martin, and each of them are over particular areas. By the way, these are amazing women and men of God. They just really are. If there's anything that I think the Free Methodist Church has, we just have wonderful people. We may not have the largest of churches, and we're trying our best to figure out how to church plant and to revitalize churches, but we really do have some amazing people. So you'll see that the bishops have that they are over certain annual conferences, and so Bishop Kenny is primarily in the West over the North Central Conference, which is a large geographic conference, the River, which is a large geographic conference from Texas all the way to Canada, Pacific Northwest, Oregon, the Network of Undeniable Blessing, which is the Sierra Pacific Conference, the Pacific Coast Japanese Conference, the Southern California Conference, and the Pacific Northwest Conference. Bishop Kay Coldy is over the Central Region, which was the formation of the Mid-America Conference and the Great Plains Conference recently that joined together for the Central Region Conference, as well as North Michigan, East Michigan, Southern Michigan, Ohio, the Harvest Conference, Keystone Conference, and the Genesis Conference. Bishop Keith Cowart is over Wabash, over Gateway, over New South, over the Southeast Region, which was the formation of the Louisiana Conference, along with the Florida Conference and the Georgia Conference. And then Acts 12:24, which is all along the East Coast and those major cities in the East. So now each bishop then is also over, Keith is over the Reach Conference, which you'll notice over here on the left-hand side as well. The Reach are non-geographically located churches, meaning they're not all in the same state. That tend to be our larger churches. And so I think there are 3 to 5 of them that have formed into the Reach Conference, and so Keith brings leadership as bishop over the Reach Conference as well. Each bishop is also over conferences that are outside the United States that are not a part of another general conference, and so Puerto Rico and some other places that are annual conferences like England that I think there are 37, in fact, that the bishops are over charge of outside of the United States, just as much as they're in charge of our conferences here. And in the past, each bishop has been in charge of a region, a Free Methodist world area, such as Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East. They assigned themselves to those areas, but the bishops are also free to assign themselves as they feel led, and they have recently decided that rather than each bishop being assigned to an area like Africa, each of them are in charge of it all, so that they can strategically send in a bishop into that area if they are a U.S. bishop, if it is needed. And so this is fairly new. They're not geographically divided up into those different nations now. They're helping as a whole. So now I want to turn to the structure, and so just give me a second as I figure out how to do this. So I want to talk about structure, and I love AI. And I don't know if I love it, but it's really interesting, the pictures that they put out. And so I don't know if you know this, but you got to be careful using pictures off the internet, because there are companies and corporations that are searching the internet for any pictures that not-for-profits may use on their websites, and then they are contacting the owners of those pictures and asking, do you want us to sue that church on your behalf? And so AI, since the robots aren't in charge yet, we can use some of the AI pictures. So anyway, that's what I chose here, and I chose cats. So we're talking about structure. We're going to talk about local structure, your local church, the annual conference, the general conference, and the world conference. Those are the kind of the 4 areas of structure in our denomination. And it begins with your local church. Your local church, all the cats herded, has an appointed lead pastor. And those pastors used to be called the pastors in charge, not because they have all the power, but they really are called to lead along with the lay members. A society, that's the language we use to describe a local church, is made up of members that meet once a year in order to vote, in order to have a discussion about leadership, and it's made up of members, often led by a board of administration, and elected, and it elects delegates to the annual conference. The local church in all of its forms is the central cell of the organism that is called Free Methodist. Now, I want to say something here, and I may come to it in another lecture, I'm not sure. There used to be a day that we had the Book of Discipline just told us all exactly how our local churches are supposed to be. There's some recognition that the local church, as described in the Book of Discipline, was great for the 1800s in a more rural setting, and that it's different now. And so there's a phrase in the Book of Discipline that says this: every local church is free to design themselves, structure themselves in order to accomplish mission. And so your local church may not have all of the committees that the Book of Discipline mentions, because you're free to structure yourselves in order to accomplish mission. In fact, there's a move to maybe even do away with a bunch of that prescriptive stuff within the discipline that tells us how certain, what a church, all these different committees, just because we don't necessarily need them, and they're not necessarily as functional as they used to be. And so, anyway, I just wanted to say that in regards to your local church. Then there's the annual conference, and every annual conference is like an umbrella over top of the churches. Elects a superintendent, generally for 4 years, though it can be for another term, another time of term. There's a board of administration in each conference. There's a ministry appointments committee, which is the bishop and the superintendent, though the bishops have often delegated the work to the superintendents and to the rest of the committee, as well as equal number of lay people on the ministry appointments committee. That's the group that does the prayerful consideration and working with the church as to where pastors should be appointed. There's then the Ministry Education and Guidance Board. They give oversight to the ordination process as well as to the emotional and spiritual health of pastors. Your MEG board in Southern Michigan, Derek Heumann is the MEG board chair, and can be broken down as well into other subgroups such as divorce, clearance, and some outcome-based ordination interview groups. And so the MEG board of equal laity and equal clergy gives oversight to both the ordination process as well as to the health of the pastor, and responds to disorder when a pastor needs confronted because of sin. And so the MEG board, it's a difficult task, but they do an important work. There are also administrators within every annual conference. You need to know them because they do an amazing job in helping with finances and to receive apportionments and help you think through how to stay out of jail. There's also church planters and church camps and camp administrators and other things within that annual conference. The annual conference is made up of all the churches represented by delegates from each church and meets yearly. In Southern Michigan, Next year, Southern Michigan, North Michigan, and East Michigan are going to have a tri-con as we gather together next June in order to meet together. Actually going to be here at Spring Arbor. And we address the question as to whether or not we should form into one conference as the whole Michigan conference and what that may look like. So be in prayer for that. The next level is General Conference. The General Conference, and all the umbrellas and the cats, I enjoy that. General Conference is the gathering of the annual conference delegates, laity and clergy, every 4 years. It has at times met every 5 years or every 6 years, but it's generally every 4 years. Bishops are elected at our General Conference. It's one of the most important works that we do. And they are elected generally for 4-year terms. At that time, the Board of Administration is also elected, also with a lay chair generally, and it's done regionally so that each region is to have representation on the board. There's a Chief Operating Officer living in Indianapolis. It's Michael Forney now. And so he brings executive leadership to the denomination, helps to keep us out of jail, helps lead the World Ministry Center, or the headquarters, Free Methodist Church USA headquarters, and just an important position. There is then an executive leadership team for missions, multiplication, justice, credentialing, and communication in each of these areas. And so working along with the bishops, you have an executive leadership team. In missions, you've got Jerry Coates that's helping to do cross-cultural engagement in world missions. In multiplication, you have Larry and Deb Walkemeyer, who are helping us think about how do we multiply. In love-driven justice, we have Fraser Venter, who is helping us think about how do we maintain biblical and social justice. In credentialing, you have Steve Tungate, who's helping us think through our MEG system. And in communication, you have Brett Heinzman, who is also helping in prayer, but helping us in communication, in putting together information and helping to get information out to our churches. I may not have mentioned this. In the annual conference is funded by apportionments, which is a different percentage in each conference and ranges anywhere from 6% to 10% or 12%. In the General Conference, it's funded by the EPP, which is 3.2%. And so some conferences they'll take the EPP, the 3.2, and combine it with 4%, like here in Southern Michigan, or 6.8%, like perhaps in Wabash, that reaches 10%. And so the EPP goes to fund the denominational ministries, the bishops, the World Ministries Center. The General Conference generally meets every 4 years, is led by bishops, and there's a rule that only one General Conference can exist inside of a nation. That's an important rule. So in the United States, even though we have different regions and different conferences, we're one General Conference in the United States. On top of the world missions let me back up. EPP that goes to support the denomination, it doesn't fund world missions generally. World missions is completely separate. It's led by the bishops and the Global Collaboration Catalyst and area directors from around the world. World missions, as we see these cats sent off, except for that one that's doesn't have any head there. It's kind of strange. World missions is really one of our more powerful ministries, I believe. Area directors in Africa, Asia, Central, South America, Europe, and Middle East bring leadership into those regions. And so in Africa, it's Mike Reinen. In Asia, it's Eric Spangler. In Central and South America, it is Ricardo Gomez. In Europe, it's I'm going to come back to you. In the Middle East, it's Dale Woods. And each of these area directors, they have been empowered to bring leadership into these regions. In fact, the bishops have recently empowered them to be able to do ordinations and to really spread out the work of our bishops, because the bishops are so they're just so they do so many things that our area directors have been given oversight, have been given permission to be able to lead. There are other networks in the Free Methodist Church that we've talked about in another video, such as ICCM, our Wonders, our Impact Middle East, our Impact Latin America, our Set Free Movement, schools, and hospitals. Josh Fajardo is our Europe area director. Forgive me, Josh. And so each of these networks are important networks that are impacting the world. But our missions is funded by our local church commitments to world missions. This year, in 2025, our area directors are going to not have to raise all of their own funds, though they have up till this point. Some of your funds from EPP are going to go to help your area directors. And so our world missions is deeply important. I believe as world missions in your local church and your local missions go, so goes your church. So I encourage you to be a part of world missions. There is then what's called the World Conference. The World Conference is a gathering of bishops and delegates from our General Conference. It's largely relational without legislative authority. That's important for some of us, right? That the World Conference can't delegate, can't decide issues of legislation for us in the United States. But it is, they do go into areas when there have been difficulty and have really brought some good leadership in countries where a bishop needed confronted or there was other issues going on. The president of the World Conference is elected. They're normally a non-U.S. bishop, and they handle major world issues with general conferences. And so we send delegates to the World Conference, and as well as help support the World Conference. And it's just a really wonderful gathering of bishops and delegates praying and thinking through how to lead the world Free Methodist Church. So that's our structure. And it's important for you to know that. Not every lay person needs to know that, but particularly for us as leaders, we need to know this structure of how all of the parts interrelate.